times of a coronavirus webinar series. So today, the topic of our webinar is that how will COVID-19 change the landscape of international education? As we all know that international education is really the key element, key part of globalization process. We have for the last several decades, the increase of international education has been really fast and actually outpaced the development of the higher education learning in many countries around the world. So, but now we are facing this pandemic that we've never seen in the history of mankind. So, there's really that caused a lot of concerns, but also trying to see how we can really cope with this situation. So tonight we are very, and also today, we're very fortunate to be joined by a group of very distinguished high level and senior international education experts. I would like to first introduce them. We are joined tonight by Ms. Peggy Blumenthal, Senior Counselor to the President, Institute of International Education, a well-known organization on international education. We're also joined by David Fletcher, Vice Provost for International Affairs, Case Western Reserve University. I understand he's also a president-elect for the International Education Administrators, Association of International Education Administrators. And we're also joined by Jeff Lehman. He's a Vice Chancellor of NYU University in Shanghai. And also joined by Nick Miles. He's a Provost and Pre-Vice Chancellor, University of Nottingham, Ningbo, China. And also joined by Stuart Perrin, Associate Principal of Entrepreneurial College, Xi'an University, Liverpool University. And also joined by Shen Wei, Professor Shen Wei, Associate Pro-Vice Chancellor, Durkin University, North in Australia. And of course, we are joined by Professor Danny Simon. He's the Executive Vice Chancellor, Duke Kunshan University in China. And also we are joined in the US by Mark Wrightington, Chancellor Emeritus, Washington University in St. Louis. And we are also, of course, we're joined by Professor Xue Lan. He's the Dean and the Schwarzman College, Tsinghua University in Beijing. And last but not least, we are joined by Professor John Zhang. He's the director of the Penn Wharton China Center. He's also a well-known professor at the Wharton Business School, University of Pennsylvania. So we are actually very fortunate to have all of you here tonight, today in this webinar. And what we see that COVID-19 is really affecting all of us. Just as April 2020, approximately 1.7 billion learners have been affected due to the school closure in response to the pandemic. According to the UNESCO monitoring, 192 countries have implemented a nationwide closure, and 5 has implemented local closure. So impact 99% of the world student population. So that's really big. But today we're going to talk also about international student as well. For example, China is the largest international student sending country in the world. We had about, since China opened up, there's about 6 million Chinese students went aboard, and currently we still have 1.4 million Chinese students overseas, and a very small percentage has returned, but largely many of them still overseas. So we want to see what are the impact of this pandemic on international education. What will that happen that influence the future teaching mode, and also the impact on the international student exchanges? How are the university coping with that? I know many of you have actually done a lot of good things, and how can we really getting back to the normal situation, what are we are the measures and what can we do? So this is really a very good question tonight. And so I would like to see all of you to actively participating. And what about also the Chinese international student, and particularly also what about the Sino-foreign JV university in China and how they cope with the situation? And what about the confidence we're going to have on students? And what about online teaching, which is, I think, another side product of this pandemic that we have actually well developed on that. And this webinar is one of the example of that. We're trying to get all of you connected. And so the international process, the globalization of international education, how that's going to be affected, and the ongoing global outbreak of coronavirus is there, bring us into a new era of education. So the paradigm, what's impact on that? So that's basically all of the topics we'd like to talk. And I'm very pleased to welcome all of you. So perhaps for today's webinar, we'd like to each of you, maybe we spend 8 minutes, probably 8 to 10 maximum. And we'll leave a half hour for discussion. We'll have a lot of people viewing this online, and we'll including some media, and we pick some of the questions and we address. We have some final discussion as well. So perhaps I could start with Peggy Blumenthal. He's a senior counselor of the to the President Institute of International Education. Perhaps you can start, please.
Thank you very much. And let me first thank CCG for convening this very timely program. And I'm very honored to be part of this very distinguished panel of experts. I want to start by saying that this question of international students and their mobility has been one that the Institute of International Education has been focused on for many, many years. As some of your listeners know, every year we collect the data and publish the data on international student flows into the United States and Americans students abroad. The United States hosts over 1 million international students, fully 1/3 of all of those students. So U.S. higher education has been actually worrying about this issue of Chinese students in the United States for a long time. Some schools worrying that they have too many Chinese students compared to other students from other countries. So even before the outbreak of the coronavirus, many U.S. universities have started to try to diversify their international student population and started to recruit more actively in other parts of the world instead of just primarily focused on Asia. They've been looking to Latin America, to Africa, to Middle East, and so on. But now, with the basically the inability to do actual site visits anywhere, and certainly not in China, they've had to think really how to keep encouraging Chinese students to come and encouraging students from all over the world to keep coming to the United States. We value international students not just for the very substantial contributions they make to our campuses financially and to the US economy, but also because they bring such unique perspectives and important talents to enrich the classroom and to help Americans better understand China and the rest of the world. So when in early February, the IIE launched a survey to see how campuses were beginning to respond to the problem of not being able to do recruiting in person in China. And we found very creative responses. I'm sure that the rest of the panel will talk about some of them because they've been launching them firsthand. But it ranged from doing a lot of online recruiting, considering standardized test scores that were required, some scores. Some of them were finding new ways to test English language ability online using other tools other than TOEFL. Many of them are working with Chinese partners on the ground to continue doing their recruiting. And I'll be posting the results of that survey on the CCG website after the webinar. But I think what the question you raised that was so interesting is the use of online education, because already Chinese students that are in the United States, or let's say were enrolled in the United States before, have already started taking their courses online. And I think many US institutions are planning to offer online courses come fall for incoming students. They don't know yet, will they be able to reopen in person, but they're prepared to offer online courses to students who are unable to get here in time, including students from China. And will this affect the interest of international students in coming to the United States at great expense and a great time investment, and if they can just take the courses online? We asked that question of many of the Education USA advisors, a network of advisors all over the world who help provide free counseling to international students who want to come to the United States. And what we're hearing from them is that most international students are not coming just for the coursework, are not coming just for the content of what they can learn, but they're coming for a whole on-campus experience. And they really value the chance to get to know professors very personally, to do joint research with professors, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level. There are these opportunities to build a network of friends and professional contacts that will be valuable to them through their whole life, to get that deep immersion in English language where they have to become more fluent, and they do, and really to appreciate the whole US experience. So we're fairly confident that online, while it's a wonderful tool, will not replace, it will supplement, but not replace the interest of international students in coming to the United States. I wanted to take just 1 minute to also talk about US students going to China and going abroad, because for us at the IIE, this was actually the founding reason for our creation 100 years ago, was the fear that America would pull back from its international engagement. And US study abroad, while growing, is still a very tiny part of the US higher education opportunity. Probably around 10% of Americans have the opportunity to study abroad before they graduate, although in some universities, 50% or 60% may be studying abroad. Overall, it's quite a small number. Americans going to China have been increasingly interested up until a few years ago, and actually the numbers were going up quite smartly, but in the last few years they have already started to decline even before the pandemic, and we're very worried about that because we know that to keep the US-China relationship strong, and we need to have Americans who have firsthand experience of China, who speak Chinese, who understand the Chinese perspective, just as we value Chinese students here coming to the United States and learning profoundly about America. Whether they agree or not with that country's perspective when they come home, or when the Americans come home, or when the Chinese go home, it's less important that they really have an insight into and see people-to-people relationships that will kind of be the glue of our US-China relationship going forward. So I just wanted to offer that we have talked to study abroad officers, and many of them say that American students are still very eager to study abroad. And in fact, we've been here before with pandemics, and we've seen, for example, during the SARS epidemic in Asia, during the Ebola crisis in Africa, during the Zika pandemic in Brazil, we've seen study abroad numbers plummet and then within a few years rebound. We're optimistic that the coronavirus is not going to stop Americans from coming to China or from studying abroad. But I think particularly for China, we all on both sides have to invest a lot of energy in making sure that exchange relationship stays very strong, and that there's a lot of student mobility, which will be kind of the engine of ongoing US-China relations in the future.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Peggy, for your great introduction. It's very, very good. And I know that you have been working for the IIE for the last
many years. Let's just say that.
We lost Henry.
Mm.
Maybe if we've lost somebody, we should just ask somebody else to carry on
Yeah,
to
just keep
the
talking.
next part.
So maybe one
Let
of
me-
our colleagues should go next.
Let me speak about how things are at a particular research university in the Midwest. I'm the former chancellor of Washington University in St. Louis. The coronavirus has been affecting this community, and like many US universities, we suspended in-person educational programs at the middle of the semester. I myself have been teaching a class, and I had the good fortune of getting to know the students in the first half of the semester. But in the last 4 or 5 weeks now, I have been teaching online, and I find that this has been quite effective. It has worked very well. The technology is very good. And I find that the ability to see the students, they're not sleeping, at least they have their eyes open and they are engaged. It's a relatively small class and is still quite interactive. Washington University, though, with 15,000 students, half graduate and half undergraduate, is at a standstill in terms of on-campus activity. I live 1 block from the campus and it is very, very quiet. We do have about 300 students living in our residence halls. Normally we would have about 5,000. And many residential colleges and universities in America are struggling financially because of the refunding of the cost for housing and for dining services. Washington University has committed to refunding on a prorated basis all of those expenses to the students. In some institutions, students are asking that there be a tuition refund. This argument is based on the fact that students are learning online rather than in person. But from my own perspective, as I said, we're doing very well with the class that we have. And I think the students are receiving equal value. And of course, the students are in a location, typically in their own homes, where their parents are at home, other siblings may be at home. And one of the things that has emerged is that the Wi-Fi capability in residences in America is not uniformly great. And the opportunity to have a private room for the student to do their work, maybe a sibling to do work in another room, and the parents to be working from home is really very unusual. This pandemic, though we've had Ebola and SARS and MERS and Zika, this is unprecedented in scale and impact, and many believe that we are entering an entirely new era, and especially so in terms of education. Washington University and many other universities in America have already announced that their summer programs will be online. And at least for us, we're not doing any in-person educational programs until at least August 1st. Many institutions are preparing for the next academic year, and they are considering online education to begin the fall semester. In thinking about international education, and especially international collaborations with other institutions, I should note that we and many other universities in America have a long-standing relationship internationally. Washington University's had international students for well over 100 years. And today, 38% of our graduate students are from other countries. 9% of our undergraduates are from other countries. And as you can appreciate, the majority of these international students do come from Asia, and China is the number one source of these international students. We have valued greatly the opportunity to work with these outstanding students, and we've also enjoyed the opportunity to develop collaborations with premier research universities around the world, including several in China. About 15 years ago, we in fact started a program that is our lead international initiative. It's called the Mcdonald International Scholars Academy. And in this program, we recruit a few really outstanding graduate and professional students from our 34 partners around the world, including several in China. I'm really proud of this program myself. It represents an emphasis on building cooperation and understanding among people and institutions around the world. We have undertaken collaborative research programs and collaborative education programs. Perhaps our premier program is with Fudan University in Shanghai, where we have developed a top executive MBA program offered on the ground at Fudan. But our program is much more expansive than that. This COVID-19 pandemic is really threatening the future of our international collaborations. As you appreciate, travel is severely restricted. The in-person interactions that accompany our collaborative efforts are diminished significantly. However, this pandemic really illustrates well the importance of building an infrastructure for international collaboration and cooperation. The Mcdonald International Scholars Academy is named in honor of John Mcdonald, who is the son of the founder of McDonnell Aircraft that became McDonnell Douglas that merged with Boeing. Pioneers in international commercial air transportation. And this is a very important component of our ability to work together. And on the other hand, international travel is a modern complication of infectious diseases. And it certainly seems to me that we need to come together today as a global community to focus on international collaboration in terms of approaches to reducing the adverse impact from the pandemic. Of course, the economic collapse across the world is threatening the ability of students to join us here in America. We have generous financial aid programs, as do many other institutions. Indeed, our Mcdonald International Scholars Academy provides full support, travel, stipend, and full tuition for the students who are selected as Mcdonald Scholars. But I know that not all institutions are going to be able to afford the support for the outstanding students from abroad. Washington University and many other institutions have very strong programs, especially in public health and in medicine. I'm really proud of our School of Medicine and our Institute for Public Health contributing in our region. And by working together, I believe that we can formulate good policies that will bring benefit to people all around the world. I know that there are challenges just now in terms of engagement internationally. These are in part economic, some political, and of course, we face a current environment with severe restrictions related to international travel and engagement in person. But I think we must reaffirm the importance of the academic community coming together to collaborate. And this pandemic affects everyone in the world, and we have the responsibility, and I believe we have the talented people, students and faculty, who are committed to making the world better. And I, for one, will work very hard to make sure that we can sustain our international engagement looking ahead.
Thank you very much. So Mr. Britton, and I think Mr. Wang is coming back to join us. But meanwhile, can we invite Mr. Xue Lan to talk about the situations in Tsinghua University and Schwarzman College?
Well, I think first of all, I'm very pleased to join this very distinguished panel to talk about this topic. I just started with an observation that actually, over the last couple of months, we saw a lot of international collaborations among people across national borders to fight with the virus. And actually, a lot of those collaborations are based on international educational experience. So they're either classmates and they're, with their professors and their colleagues through international collaboration. So that actually showed, it's just, a side story of showing how important international education is, in building this bond that, has become so critical when we are facing a crisis like this. So I think while in the short term, the impact on international education may be somewhat uncertain, but I think in the long run, I think the demand for high quality education going beyond national borders, I think that will not change. I think that maybe that the positive side is that a lot of this, as represented here, the kind of hybrid model actually may become, people's better choice. I think actually just using the Schwarzman College as one example, we are on the sort of reverse side as in many other cases. We are actually 80% of our students are international, and 20% are Chinese national. And I think our application this year, for coming in next year, I think actually our Chinese application has risen very fast. We just started our international application just a few days ago. We are hoping that people will continue to find that coming to China to study is important, and I think Schwarzman College is an attractive choice for them. I think also, let me also talk a little bit about the Tsinghua's experience. Tsinghua probably is probably the first university in the world to start a whole sort of online experiment for the whole university. Started actually on February the 3rd. Basically, the university made the choice at the end of January that Tsinghua will start the semester on time online. So on February the 3rd, over 57,000 Tsinghua faculty and students started the first online class. And also, I think the university also provided, over to the training to faculty members of 2,600 faculty members received training of how to use like Zoom, Tencent, whatever, online tools. And so I think actually overall, I think 3,923 classes were started on time in February. So this whole semester, the whole university was started on time. So it's probably the largest, sort of online education in the world, that started in, in this way. Of course, I think it's a very complicated system that there's a lot of, hard work that's, going, behind the doors in terms of how to make sure that the technical side would work, and also how in terms of to the interactions among faculty and students, and also in terms of how do you, making sure that the students are fully engaged. So there's a lot of hard work behind it. But I think fortunately Tsinghua had some preparation, some sort of online software before, so I think that actually came in handy. Also, in the meantime, that Tsinghua University also started to offer the class over 1,900 class online to the entire world. So actually people in China, outside China can take those courses online. And also Tsinghua has worked with universities in Wuhan, because I think given the situation in Wuhan, so actually we worked with the Wuhan University of Science and Technology. We opened like a clone class for them. So we have a particular class in Tsinghua, and then they can offer the same class at Wuhan, University of Science and Technology, and they have the same class joining the classroom. So I think that's 147 cloned class was also opened up. So I think that's sort of the Tsinghua's experience, in sort of offering education online. So I think that my guess is that now many faculty members are beginning to like the experience, and actually I think the education will never be the same forever. So I think at least at the Schwarzman College, we joined the other schools, and we started to, at first we tried to get the student back home safely, and then started to get them to study online. And then we also now, at one time that we tried to reassemble them somewhere, but that didn't work. I think Jeff laughed. I think our effort. We tried very hard, but anyway, I think very daring. I mean, we spent a lot of effort in trying to do that, but anyway, but now I think we are trying, doing our online education very nicely, and we have every week we have a lot of speakers joining the students. So to really try to recreate the kind of intellectual environment for students to be able to study together, to learn together, and also to interact with their local communities. Now, actually, we are getting ready for capstone projects and so on. So I think that's sort of the experience we've had so far, and I'm sure that a lot of the other colleagues are also going through that similar experience. Now, in reflection, I think that this whole experience has opened up many new windows that we previously have not thought about. But now I think, given the experience, even those after the crisis, after the virus, and we may go back to our traditional model, but that will, a lot of new elements will definitely bring into our educational process. So I think that I think that in a way this is a crisis, but also it's new opportunities for all of us on international education. Let me stop here.
Great.
I, for one, would like to congratulate you on really a development of a tremendous program. I had the good fortune about a year and a half ago to visit Schwarzman College and saw firsthand what you have done in terms of physical infrastructure. And I can tell you that outstanding people, certainly from Washington University, but from around the world, are anxious to gain admission. It's people like Steve Schwarzman and John Mcdonald from St. Louis who are making a huge difference with their philanthropic support to encourage programs like this. I do believe that one of the great values of what you're doing stems from the fact that people come together in person, work collaboratively, learn together, and get to know each other and understand their perspectives on the important issues. The ability of Tsinghua University to launch its entire program online is very impressive. And we and other institutions in America are striving to do the same. But I'm confident that we're not going to replace the importance of an in-person residential experience. And we must work in order to approach the development of vaccines and uniform, quick testing to make sure that we can return to the kind of educational experience that our students aspire to have.
Can't agree with you more. Thank you. Thank you for my comments.
Continue. Should we continue?
Okay. Thank you very much. And next, we want to invite Mr. Simon from Duke Kunshan University to speak about your programs and policies to cope with the COVID-19 situation, please.
Great, thank you. And thanks CCG for organizing such an important panel with such a distinguished group of people, many of whom are old friends, and it's great to see them all here together. Duke Kunshan University basically was forged as a independent joint venture university in 2013. And basically its core mission has been to advance liberal arts education in China. And we have a partnership that involves Duke University, Wuhan University, and the city of Kunshan, which is about an hour or so outside of Shanghai. From the beginning, DKU was designed as a global university. Our goal was to have 60% students from China and 40% international students, and drawing faculty from all over the world. 75% of our faculty are either in tenure track roles at the DKU campus. 25% of the faculty are drawn from Duke and other places around the globe. Our core concept, or at least one of the core concepts, is this concept of rooted globalism. And rooted globalism really is the idea that while all students should understand and have an appreciation for their home country and their home cultures, etc., they also need to have global awareness. And so our basic proposition is that we're here to produce global citizens who have a larger purpose in mind in terms of addressing the world's most difficult and pressing problems as they pursue their careers in the years ahead. DKU, when it was conceived, it was also conceived as an important statement on the part of Duke University itself. And that is that as Duke put together its own internationalization strategy, it saw that having a footprint in China was going to be an important hallmark of its international success. And why not? China, the second largest economy in the world, soon to be perhaps the first, and China having a talent pool almost second to none in terms of people who are well-versed in science and technology, and a government that is very strongly committed to innovation. And thus it was seen that this was a great opportunity for Duke to forge a relationship with the other most important country in the world for the 21st century. The idea from the very beginning was that this was not a one-way flow of knowledge and information. It wasn't simply Duke transferring information or courses or curriculum, but it was seen from the very beginning as a way to foment two-way technology or knowledge transfer. There could be curricular innovation and pedagogical innovation taking place at DKU that simply wasn't possible at Duke. And Duke therefore had an opportunity to learn as much from DKU as DKU had to learn from Duke itself. Now, given that it was only established in 2013, it's a relatively young university. In fact, we haven't even yet graduated our first class. We are about this year to admit our third class. We have now about 725 students or so on campus, about 600 undergraduates and about 125 graduate students. We have somewhere between, we've had 3 to 5 graduate programs, along with an undergraduate degree program. And we also have an executive education set of offerings as well. When this crisis started in the middle of the week of Chinese New Year, it basically left a lot of people, dispersed all around China, all around Asia, and even all around the world. And we very quickly had to put together a task force, an emergency task force, to deal with the challenges. We moved very, very quickly to lock down our campus, and we moved very quickly to look to protect our community so that we could reduce the risk of the virus coming on campus. I think the coronavirus, as Shrelan has suggested, obviously it's a catastrophic event in terms of the number of people who have died and the number of people who've gotten ill. But it also has had the effect of starting to help reshape, I think, in some important ways, the initial configuration that had existed among the various partners in this joint venture university. And in particular, I think it's important to understand the connection between Duke and Duke Kunshan University, because it has led to, I think, the opening up and the expansion of the parameters of how Duke and DKU engage with one another, not only in the short term, but also I think in the long term. And it has some very promising possibilities that are out there. So let me lay out 3 things that I think are really critical about what's gone on. We've heard already about the role of technology, and I would agree 100%. We're not going to ever replace the value and the utility of face-to-face education. It's an important part of the bridges we want to build among individuals and the sensitivity about cross-cultural engagement. And it's much harder to do when you're doing so across a screen than when you're doing so in person. And so I don't think this onset of the use of technology or expanded use of technology is a threat to face-to-face education. But I think that as we look at what lies ahead and we look at the nature of our curriculum, we can see some things that are going to happen because of this technological change. For example, from the very beginning, DKU has had a modular curriculum. Rather than teaching in full semesters of 14 or 15 weeks, we've from the beginning taught in a series of 4 7-week modules. And being able to teach in this modular structure has actually lent itself very well to the application of technology, particularly when we had already started our spring, what we call S3. We were able to sort of pick up the pieces very quickly and finish that module and then go on to where we are now, and that is engaged in S4, the last half of our spring semester. A lot of this was made possible because of the almost seamless collaboration that existed between the 2 partners here, Duke and Duke Kunshan University. We were able to move online to create literally an online university in about 3 weeks' time. And I think when I say that, I don't mean just put courses online. I mean have a total student experience in classroom and perhaps out of the classroom that really provided students a greater awareness of the world and what was going on around them, including lots of information about the spread of the virus and what it meant possibly to not only their circumstance, but again, this idea of rooted globalism, of raising their global awareness. And I think that was an important part. I think the success in harnessing this technology opens up a lot of new parameters for us. And whether or not we use more or less a blended model going forward, the idea is that we can take advantage of not only face-to-face, but eventually also the value of online education as an integral part of our curriculum and make that curriculum richer and offer the students more flexibility in terms of how they take on the challenges of their curriculum. The second thing I think is the fact that through this, the impact of the virus, the relationship between Duke and DKU has now started to become what I call reconfigured and reconceptualized. a lot of campuses have what they call outposts overseas. And I think the idea of what is going on now is a transition from this outpost idea to really having DKU become much more of an integral part of the Duke academic landscape. And I think this is very, very important. And I think this is something that's going to start to happen because of the need to have a global access and to different opportunities when crises like these strike. So we're now talking about, for example, this coming fall, if a certain visa restrictions exist and certain travel limitations exist, that the Chinese students, for example, who were admitted to Duke for the fall 2020 may in fact start their education on the DKU campus within China. This is something that is very unique. It's being driven right now by necessity, but I venture to say, in my sense of this over the longer term, is that it's now initiated a new way of thinking about how DKU and Duke interface with one another over the long term, and how to make DKU better integrated into the fabric of the offerings at Duke University overall for the longer term. And I think this is a very, very important thing. The third thing I think that is happening, it has to do with the consequences of the virus in terms of the impact of globalization itself. While Duke and DKU worked together over time to quickly disperse our students and get them back, and we supported them financially to make that move to return to their homes and to what we thought would be a safer venue for them to be at. We also learned very quickly that we had to mobilize a capacity to deliver an online education across borders and cultures all around the world. We have an undergraduate population that has more than 40 different countries represented. And we have a faculty that comes from right now over 13 different countries. When the Chinese New Year came, as I mentioned, people were dispersed everywhere. And in many ways, when the virus started to spread globally, people were then had to settle in place. And we had to figure out, given different time zones, different internet capabilities, et cetera, how we could deliver our product to students in very far off places, as well as people in the United States and also those located in China. We needed to have, in other words, a global capability. And I'm very, very happy to say that the IT teams in China at DKU and the IT team at Duke were able to work together in a highly collaborative fashion to make sure that we could deliver the best quality programs and courses without too many glitches along the way. The thing that we also realized, and I think that's as important, is that the stakeholders in this entire proposition are not just the students or the faculty, but also the parents and also the communities from which they're from. And we had to make sure that we expanded our communication and our contact with people to keep them informed what was going on at DKU and how DKU was going to continue to service the students that they had entrusted to us as part of their investment, particularly in one-child families from China who had obviously made a big investment in selecting DKU. Of course, the coronavirus was a global phenomena, and just like DKU was experiencing difficulties and challenges, so were other universities. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that we really created a transnational learning community that I believe is going to be in place now as a permanent part of the architecture of Duke Kunshan University. Ironically, and I think this is really one of the most interesting things, is that the experience that Duke had in helping DKU get through the coronavirus as it had impacted on China very soon became the same capability that they were able to harness and when the virus spread to the United States and forced the move to online at Duke. This enabled the Duke staff and faculty to very quickly produce a very high quality product that they could deliver to the Duke students and bring into existence in a very short period of time. I think this is very, very important because I think it speaks to the fact that the original concept of this two-way knowledge transfer really did in fact make itself felt and really served a purpose for not only DKU, but also for Duke itself, and eventually has brought in Wuhan University and even the city of Kunshan. So I'm very happy with what we've ended up doing. As I said from the beginning, it's an unfortunate circumstance that has generated this kind of rethink, but I think that, as they say, within every cloud, there's a silver lining. So hopefully, as we carry forward, we'll able to do a lot of learning and input into our new plans, a lot of that learning from this particular experience. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dennis, and I hope now this time I can be here. Great. I think that Dennis has made a very good remark, and also I have heard what Professor also Dean shared, and also Wrighton, Professor Wrighton, the comments. I apologize for some technical problem that here the office is off, so we have to experience some technical problem. But now we are back online, and so I think the problem we are really facing is we're meeting a lot of challenges, and how we can try to innovative and also try our best to back to normal. So thank you again, Professor Dennis Simon. And now I'd like to invite Professor Jeffrey Lehman. He's the Vice Chancellor at Nyu Shanghai, and also he's the former president of Cornell University, and he has been the founding dean of Peking University School of Transnational Law. Professor Lehman, your time, please.
First, I'm going to unmute, and then I'm going to offer my thanks to Henry Wang and CCG for convening tonight's webinar on this very important topic. I suspect most of the viewers know about NYU Shanghai. It's the first Sino-American joint comprehensive research university. It's a partnership between NYU and East China Normal University, and it's also the third degree-granting campus within NYU's global network. We're completing our 8th year of teaching, about to graduate our 4th class of undergraduates. Half our students come from China, and the other half come from more than 80 different countries from around the world. The panel has been asked to talk about the question, how will COVID-19 change the landscape of international education? I think it's certainly the case that none of us can speak with real confidence beyond the next few months. At the same time, it is really important that we do what this panel is doing, that we ponder, that we speculate, that we try to map out a range of possibilities for how our commitment to international education will be transformed. When I do that, when I ponder and speculate on this topic, I like to distinguish between two different dimensions. One is more physical and one is more philosophical. Along the more physical dimension, we're asking whether COVID-19 might change where undergraduate and graduate students place their bodies as they learn. Will it change how often they sit in a room together with one another and a teacher to study? Will it change how often they travel to another country to study? Another dimension, the philosophical dimension, asks whether COVID-19 and the pandemic might change the emphasis that universities place on normative values such as cosmopolitanism, on the notion that people everywhere ought to see themselves as bound up in a single, united human community. So let me start with the physical aspect of this question. The question here is whether COVID-19 is an accelerant. Is it an intensifier for forces that have, over the past 8 years, arguably been putting pressure on traditional higher education? So one of those forces was digital technology, and the other was anti-globalist politics. So in 2012, two entities were launched, Coursera and edX, that provided massive open online courses, or MOOCs. And a third entity was launched, the Minerva schools at KGI, that would have no classrooms and would teach all its classes as online seminars. These three launches in 2012 stimulated a rush of speculation about whether interest in residential learning would fade in favor of much less expensive online models. And that didn't happen, at least for elite education. And the primary reason was that the online versions did not provide the same kind of engaged, active learning experience that traditional campuses offer. And even though Minerva worked very hard to incorporate an active learning pedagogy into its online seminars, students still wanted to be able to engage with one another outside the classroom in a way that the technology did not fully facilitate. Well, I think over the past few months, we have seen COVID-19 work as a kind of accelerant, stimulating some significant advances in remote learning pedagogy. Certainly at NYU Shanghai, our faculty, which started a couple of weeks after Tsinghua, we started on February 17th, our faculty has been using a new generation of asynchronous and synchronous technologies to enable a kind of learning experience that was previously available only when students and teachers were co-located. So our math professors have their students present proofs for discussion and evaluation by their classmates. We have a piano professor who is teaching globally online using techniques that enable students to have simultaneous close-up views of her hands and her face. We have professors breaking huge classes up into small teams that work together in breakout groups while the professor moves around from group to group. And even extracurricular activities are being experienced together remotely in new ways. Now, it's not the same thing as sitting in the same room. It still is not that, but it is much, much closer than it was in 2012. So the question is it possible that we will finally see the kind of higher education disruption that some people have been predicting for a long time? So I don't think so, at least for undergraduate education. Part of what defines the residential college experience, for those who can afford it at least, has nothing to do with pedagogy. It has to do with growing up, separating from one's parents, and living in a community of one's peers. And I think if anything, when I talk to our students, the COVID-19 pandemic has made this generation clamor for that kind of experience even more. The other aspect of elite international education that some might think has been challenged by COVID-19 along the physical dimension is the idea of spending part of one's university years studying in another country. Nations have closed their borders to non-citizens. The question is it possible that the interruption of 2020 in students' ability to physically study away might bring about a long-term shift in universities' willingness to make those experiences available? And again, I honestly don't think so. We're still in the middle of the experience, but at least for a university like NYU, the availability of a global network with campuses and study away sites distributed all around the globe has provided a kind of flexibility and adaptability that NYU didn't have when it was confined to a single campus in a single city. So when COVID-19 first struck China, hundreds of NYU Shanghai students immediately opted to spend the semester at other NYU locations around the world. Now, it turns out that the pandemic pursued them wherever they went, but I still think that the experience of flexibility is something that they valued and something that NYU values, much as Dennis was saying that Duke is now valuing that flexibility and adaptability of being in multiple places even more. So let me turn quickly to this philosophical dimension, which is whether there's going to be a retreat from the cosmopolitan values that international universities we, at least the people on this panel, have been alarmed by the rise around the world of nationalist, xenophobic, anti-cosmopolitan movements. Economic theory says that in every country, global integration and free trade is going to help some people and hurt others. And only if the winners compensate the losers can everyone be better off. And it has become apparent that for several decades of accelerating globalization, the winners did not compensate the losers. And so there's been ferocious backlash in the last 5 years. Major countries have exited from treaties and unions with other countries and from international organizations. And they've spoken of building walls, blocking refugees, blocking immigrants, even calling on their citizens to return home. And during the pandemic itself, we have seen governments bidding against each other for scarce medical resources, insisting that their primary obligation must be to provide those resources to their own citizens. So the question is it possible that the spirit of the age will be accelerated by the pandemic so that there is less interest on the part of students and parents in the kind of cosmopolitanism that universities like ours advocate? Is it possible that parents will tell their children, give up your fantasy of being a global citizen, work on advancing your national credentials? Again, it's possible, we don't know for sure, but I don't think so. The skills that a cosmopolitan education nurtures remain durable and versatile. They are the kind of meta skills that enable students to continuously reinvent themselves over the course of a long life, to continuously adapt to the demands of a continuously evolving global economy. This kind of education provides an expanded set of perspectives and an expanded set of experiences that students are going to be able to harvest for creative insights and solutions to a wide range of problems. And I think Shui-Lan spoke quite eloquently about how many of the innovations that are happening now in response to the pandemic derive from classmates who enjoyed this kind of experience. So in conclusion, obviously, the pandemic is a big deal. It will bring about big changes in what we do, but I don't think that they're going to be quite as sweeping in terms of international education as some people might imagine. Thank you.
So I think we're waiting for President Wang Huiyao to come back to us. Apparently there's some ongoing technical issues back in Beijing headquarters, but maybe we can just go ahead, and thank you very much for Mr. Lehman's introduction just now. And now we give our virtual floor to Mr. Fleshler from Case Western Reserve University.
Well, thank you. And this certainly is a distinguished panel, and nice to see some of you that I've known for many, many years. And thank you, Henry, for putting this together. This is an important conversation, as everyone has said. Many of you have made some of the points that I was also going to make, so I'll try not to go over those too much. But I'll start with a little bit of contrariness to what many people are saying. Those of you who opened your papers and computers yesterday morning in the United States saw a New York Times headline that said 22 million people have filed for unemployment. The fact that this coronavirus pandemic is causing so much pain to so many people so quickly. And from what we can see, it's not likely that A, it's going to end very quickly, and B, when it does end, that all of a sudden all those jobs are going to come back. And if you look at higher education with that background, you start saying, what does this mean for A, non-elite universities, and B, even those who are elite are starting to feel, even in the very short term, a pain that they may not have felt certainly since the recession of 2008, and maybe before that. And I would note that the presidents of both Harvard and MIT have already announced that they're taking pay cuts because they see what's coming. So with that as a sort of general context, let me very quickly tell you what's happened at Case Western Reserve, because I think this is happening everywhere. Chancellor Wrighton talked a little bit about the fact that this has also happened at Washington University in St. Louis. We originally made an announcement that we were going to go on remote learning through April 6th. Very quickly, we realized that we needed to go remote for the rest of the semester. At that point, again, many have already talked about this. We had to scramble to bring virtually all of our study abroad students home, and many of our international students. We have about 2,200 international students, 65% of whom are from China. Many of those students went home, and like all of the other university presidents and deans here, we went on full remote learning. We're also on full remote learning through the summer, and now are thinking about what's going to happen in the fall. Even if we can come back in the fall, and I think there's a question for all of us as to what the country is going to look like at that point. Even if we can come back in the fall, there's a whole question of how are we going to be able to do that? Will we need to have social distancing when we come back? Does that mean that students will need to sit 6 feet apart from each other? That students can only be in dormitories when they have single rooms? And we already know we're going to go on hybrid or dual learning in the fall, because we're predicting that many of our international students, particularly Chinese students, will not be able to get back to the United States because the visa offices in China and elsewhere currently are closed. So you can't, students who want to apply for visas can't even do that currently. And when they do, those visa offices are going to be jammed with students, business people, and others trying to get into the country. So we're predicting that most of them won't be able to be here for the fall. So we'll have to go to remote learning, at least for those students, and maybe for many. The situation in the future, then, when we start thinking about it, there's, first of all, there's a short term and there's a long term. What I talked about, social distancing, if students are back on campus, and remote learning. The broader implications of that are not only pedagogical, but they're also financial. Will students want to come to the United States and be in classrooms where they have to sit far apart from each other, where they potentially can't go out and be able to play on athletic fields or be in plays. And so there's a whole question, I think, of, at least in the short term, A, will students be able to come here if they're international students? And B, if they can come here, what will their experience be? And then do they want to come? The longer term, which I think is what Professor Lehman and others were talking about, is will there be a fundamental reexamination of higher education generally and international higher education specifically? It strikes me that you can break this into two areas. One is academic, and the other is social and co-curricular. I agree with many of the panelists that students at the age of 18 are going to want to be out of the house. They're going to want to be with others. They're not going to want to be learning like we're learning. We're in an environment here because they need to grow up. So I think that the residential campus certainly will continue. But because of what we're seeing through this COVID-19 process and what Professor Lehman talked about as the speeding up of online pedagogy, I think that the way that universities operate may be quite different in the classroom. So there'll be, it strikes me that there may be much more blended kinds of experience for students and for faculty members, some being taught in person, face to face, and some being taught just like this, because you'll find faculty members who are real experts in places like Duke Kunshan University, who can come to Case Western Reserve in Cleveland virtually and do it in ways that they've never been able to do it before. Yet those students will remain on campus, having a social and real experience. Now, then the question becomes, and this is where I will end, then the question becomes, what happens to the underlying finances and the financial model of universities that are so dependent on students coming to their campus, paying tuition that the room and board is a fairly small part of the overall tuition. But if they come to campus and part of their experience is online, will they be willing to pay the same amount that they have in the past? So I think that these are all the questions that are going to come out of this situation. And I think that the fact that we're only at the beginning in many ways, certainly at least in the United States, it appears that we're only at the beginning and that we're a year away or so from a vaccine, is going to put a great deal of pressure on all of us in higher education.
I think Mr. Wang is right here with us. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks the comments from the U.S. perspective. We had all the great sharing. Actually, I really found that fascinating for all of you. And also we are thinking how the history may develop from this kind of point of view. Now, so maybe next we want to have Professor John Zhang. Maybe you can give a bit of from University of Pennsylvania perspective in the business school at Wharton. And so it's your time, please.
All right, I want to thank CCG for hosting this event, and also want to thank all the distinguished guests and to share your views. I would have to say that I agree with everything you just said, and I just offer some professor's point of view. I think that I certainly cannot represent the University of Pennsylvania or the Wharton School. But as a professor, we do actually discuss this particular question, and we kind of wondering what will happen after the COVID-19. Is the educational environment going to be fundamentally changed, or in fact is going to go back to the what we had before, what we are familiar with? Certainly from a professor point of view, certainly from my point of view, I hope that nothing really drastically changed before my retirement. And but definitely that I think many of us do share the view that probably if you look into the history and put everything in perspective, and things may not change in a drastic way. And I think to answer that question, basically, I would say that we probably need to look at 3 different dimensions. Number one, how the teaching is going to be done, right? And number 2 is basically the content of education. So what is going to be is the content going to change that much? Number 3, I would think that the students, are the student going to change, especially that we're going to have more lessons, fewer international students, how in fact that this new environment will impact on the student from China. So let me just go back to those 3 different dimensions and give you my point of view. Mostly it's the wrong view, okay? I think that I don't really think that the educational environment is going to drastically change because of the COVID-19. Here's my thinking. In fact, my first degree was actually in history. And if you look into the history, I think the university has been in existence for the past over 1,000 years. If you go back to the Confucius time, for instance, and that's over 2,000 years ago. And you have a masters and disciples that get together in the same room and in person and doing all kind of different discussions and lecturing, and the people would inspire each other, and afterwards they will have a drink together and so on and so forth. I think that particular format has really survived the test of time. I think that nature has selected this particular format. To me, that I just cannot see that in fact that this could change. And indeed that if you go back to 1918, for instance, there was this Spanish flu. I think the Spanish flu probably was even, way worse, right? And than what's going on today. If you look at, I was looking up at some of the numbers this morning, and for Spanish flu, there were 50 million deaths and worldwide. And if you look at the United States, there were 675,000 deaths. And you look at in Philadelphia, Philadelphia was actually the epicenter at the time. Okay, Philadelphia had 16,000 deaths and at the time. Indeed, I was looking at the response from University of Pennsylvania at the time, and was the university closed? Did they send all the students back to their own and homes and all that? None of that actually happened. I think that we had the different schools would actually close some of the big events at different point in time. And you have the sanitation crews and going to the dormitories and clean up everything and so on and so forth. And I think that the whole episode and at the time lasted about a month. After that, everything went back to the normal. So I don't know if we really today have an overreaction for some reason, or in fact, the leadership imperatives have changed so much that somehow we have to react to this the new and pandemic in a different way. And but certainly, I think that after the Spanish flu, university went back to the same way, and we are still doing the same kind of instruction. And at the time, in terms of how we teach the students, there is a lot of reason for me to believe that, in fact, that the educational environment may not change that much. We had at Wharton, we had a technology committee and a few years back, and we have all the a group of faculty members and basically get together and talk about all those technologies in use, all those possible technologies on the horizon that may impact upon the education. And in fact, that there are some professors who are very, very effective in using this online technology, all this the camera angle and the performance on camera and all that. And I think we look into every one of those aspects. In the end, I think people come to the conclusion that nothing can substitute in-person and lecturing and the discussion. And certainly at the high end of the education, I think that most people come to the conclusion that probably we're not going to drastically change just because of the new technology on the horizon. I think if you look at China, that probably is also the case. And at one point, I remember that there is this national TV college. Right? That was a huge, huge deal that educated a large number of people. And but in the end, still, I think that you go to Tsinghua, you go to Beida, still is the ideal and for all the students. This is not just for undergraduate students. I think in my experience is that even for the MBA student, for instance, social networking is just such a big dimension to their education. And the fact that they can work with each other, make friends with each other, and leverage each other's influence, and work on the project in person and so on. And those kind of things really cannot be substituted by online education. Personally, in fact, I'm teaching 3 classes online. I think that this is one part of the University of Pennsylvania has done tremendously well. Within 1 week, we switched thousands of classes online. And in fact, I teach 3 classes after the, I think the March 15th, and we began to switch online. So I'm doing online education. Indeed, that at my home, I built this studio with all the studio lights, with a high definition camera and everything. And the only thing I have not done is to hire a stylist, and the university said they don't want to reimburse, so I didn't do that. But other than that, and I really like it because every day I can just walk into my office with my pajama pants, and I don't have to wear something fancy. And then I would teach, talk to the students. And in fact, that if this thing can continue, I can imagine that I would just go to Miami, stay on the beach, and then teach the students. That'd be a really, really good idea. But I think that in the process, you really sense that the students really don't like this as much, right? We can still do the instruction. We can still, in fact, do all the lecturing, case discussions and group discussions and so on and so forth. But there is a huge dimension that's missing, which is that the students can chit chat with each other, and student can go to a bar for a drink afterwards, and student can actually have a free interactions with each other and inspire each other. I think in that sense, I would say that in fact that online technology probably is a supplement for what we do. I just cannot imagine that it's going to be a predominant form of education, and certainly not for the for the school like University of Pennsylvania and Wharton. And I think that there is a lot of reason for me to think that probably we're not going to change that much, right? And I think back in 1918, there was no promise of a really good medical schools, and all the research institute, they all rush and pull the resources together to develop the drugs and develop the vaccines and then so on and so forth. I think that today the science and technology is also different in that regard. And I think that science will come to the rescue, and most likely that I think that probably within a year, definitely within a year. And everybody look back and basically say, wow, why we were so panicking about everything. That would be my sense in terms of whether the way we teach the students will change drastically. My answer would be that probably not. And I just cannot imagine that would be the case, and the world would be just so different if that's the case. In terms of content of education, in that regard, I think that there can be a lot of changes. I think if you just look at all the media discussion today about the global environment and what has happened and how we got to where we are today, I think that there seems to be some kind of a consensus out there that the globalization seems to be overdone and over the years, and without a lot of careful thoughts, and also that the companies' focus on the profitability probably is also overdone. There seem to be a lot of corporations that get together, they begin to and push for different dimensions in managing their company. And also that the whole society's focus on efficiency that also seems to be overdone. I think certainly from a business school point of view, I think going forward, it's possible that the way we teach the students, the content in our teaching may be quite different, and but that remains to be seen. See if that's the case. I think in terms of the students that in our classroom, who are those students? Are there more international students, fewer international students? Are there more students from China or fewer students in China? I think ultimately that really depends on three things, right? So number one, students need to have the motivation to go abroad and study there. And if you look at before the COVID-19, the motivation was very, very strong. Certainly in China, the motivation is very, very strong. And I just cannot see that that motivation would drastically change and after the COVID-19. I think just basically, if you let the people do independent thinking, okay, you let students to make their free choices, I think that those motivations are still there. And so motivation, I don't think probably change that much. But I think in terms of, but of course that the second thing is that would the United States and remain the same and allowing any kind of any student from abroad and who want to study in US will come to the US. That probably is a little bit questionable, right? So even before the COVID-19, you're already seen and a lot of changes there, and for certain sensitive areas of our research, and of course that U.S. government will block the entry of the students and so on and so forth. But definitely, as a university, we have all the motivation we need and to receive the international students. And I think that in that regard, I think that on the U.S. side, you probably worry a little bit about the government and the restriction. But certainly that from university point of view, university like Washington University in St. Louis or University of Pennsylvania, all those kind of schools, definitely they want to have academic freedom. They definitely want to have a freedom of meeting international students and so on. Definitely we will fight for it, right? So that part probably not going to change as much. But on the other hand, that you look at China, for instance, in China, who knows what will happen, right? So there that it's not a matter of admitting students into China or let a student to go out. That's also could be an issue. And so there that I think there is also quite a bit of uncertainty in the end that what will happen. And so I think that overall as a professor, and I would think that probably, and this idea that somehow that COVID-19 and is going to drastically change the sort of international educational landscape, and maybe a little bit oversold. That's my point.
John, I hope that you are right. As I indicated when we gathered for this program that I would have to leave at 9:30 p.m. in China. I apologize for withdrawing at this point, but I wanted to make a few comments that perhaps you can discuss later in my absence. First, the United States is very open to having international students, and this includes, of course, Washington University, Case Western Reserve, and the other premier institutions represented in this webinar. But the current students, and many are still here in America, they're facing psychological problems. They may have financial challenges, and they, of course, are concerned about their physical health. And I hope that listeners in China who have friends and family members here in the United States will reach out to those students and support them. We will do our very best, and I speak on behalf of all of higher education in the United States. We will do our very best to support these outstanding students. I would like to say that I subscribe very much to what Vice Chancellor Lehman said. We must resist isolationism. We are proud in America that we have a great country, but we also need to avoid extremism in connection with nationalism. I'm myself proud to be an American, but I'm also very pleased with the relationships that I have developed with individuals in higher education all around the world, and especially so in China. I look forward to continuing our work together. The pandemic illustrates what is true about many global problems. No single institution, and indeed no single country, can solve these problems. And I hope that by marshaling our talented resources in terms of our considerable financial strength, our talented students and our talented faculty, that we can work together to overcome this pandemic, address other global problems, and rebuild our economy. I really appreciate, Henry, your including me. I recall that we were together at Xi'an Jiao Tong University back in late September. I enjoyed meeting you then, and
Yes.
it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. To all in China who are listening in, I hope that I have an opportunity soon to visit again. I've enjoyed my trips to China since 1985 on many occasions, and I look forward to returning again soon. Thank you very much for including me.
Thank you, Professor Wrighton, and for your good remarks, and really appreciate to have you. You're right. I think that this demonstrates that both countries still have a very strong desire to collaborate in terms of international students. So your comments is very much appreciated, and which shows that China and the US still have a big people-to-people exchanges, which is student that is very important. I also want to thank John that he's a professor at Wharton Business School, but also he's the director of a Pan-Wharton China Center, which is a very famous center in China. So tonight we actually, is absolutely, we are having such a fabulous, very distinguished panel we are here. We had, I also noticed that, we had David Flasher. He's also president-elect of Association of International Education Administrators. So representing a large number of universities in the US as well. So we are, having very good discussion. I apologize that we have some technical problem because of the office closed office hour. We have some connecting problem, but I was told that otherwise it was fine. We had actually my technical staff was telling me that we have about over 600,000 to 700,000 people watching online and internationally, which is compatible to our previous international webinar as well. And also I think those all of you, the university president, are very attractive. We have also Danny Simon. He was a vice president of the University of Arizona, but also he was the vice chancellor of the University of Oregon. I mean, we have all the experienced people here too. So now I would like to also have invite Nick Miles. He's the provost and vice chancellor of the University of Nottingham, Ningbo, which is actually one of the first JV university in China and one of the earliest. Perhaps you can share your perspective as well. Nick? If Nick is not online at this moment, maybe we have the Sun Wei. He's
associate vice chancellor from Deakin University in Australia, and this time we have president university from not only from US but also UK and Australia. So why not, Sen-Wei, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Henry. I hope you can all hear me. And thank you for inviting me for this very distinguished panel. And I feel very privileged to be the representative from Down Under to give a bit Australian perspective. And so obviously, this is a difficult time for higher education across the world, and particularly for Australia also. As you probably have known, Australia was one of the top destinations for international students. Out of the 5 million plus international students worldwide, Australia has a share around 6%, just over 300,000 students. And many of our students come from China, India, but also Vietnam, Indonesia, Nepal, Brazil, and Malaysia. And also the international education, which we call it an export industry, is a very critical to Australia's economy. It's the third largest export industry. And the education exports last year contribute to over 40 billion Australian dollars to Australia's GDP, according to Australia's Bureau of Statistics. And it's not just the dollar value, it also has a lot of importance for employment. A 2015 Deloitte report, for instance, found over 130,000 full-time jobs in Australia were created due to international student flows. And that includes in accommodation, other living expenses, entertainment and tourism sectors for the Australian economy. And as you could imagine, due to the scale of the international student cohort, this has a very fundamental impact for Australian universities. And I think many of the panelists have talked about the kind of pros and the positive, the negative, just like, the Chinese word for crisis, 危机, means both danger and opportunities. So I look at the positive and the negative and the kind of positive dimension. Obviously, the negative dimension is a disruption to teaching. And the Australian universities, some of them are very ready to move to online education. And we are fortunate to be one of them. Deakin University, since its foundation in 1970s, have been a leader in online education. We have actually around over 12,000 students starting full-time online already out of the 65,000 student population. So we were able to shift to online education without any delay. But I understand for some other colleagues in other universities, this was not an easy task. Teaching has to be paused and, staff has to be trained, etc. And but I think some of the colleagues have also alluded to it's not only the software or the platforms, it's also the intellectual competences, the skills and the kind of know-how for online delivery, because it's not just putting the materials, curriculum online, it's also how to engage. And some Australians have employed artificial intelligence and other new technology to deal with that. And the second thing is, I think, the financial burden. And last year, there was a lot of discussion on diversification strategy for international students, not overly rely on China in particular. But I think that the COVID-19 changed everything, because all of the international students are now impacted, not only Chinese students. And a number of, the university, which with very high proportion of international students, currently under a lot of financial burdens. And, the newspaper have, said, some universities are suffering between 470 million to almost 600 million Australian dollars this year. And so this is a major financial hole for many universities. And that's already has some impact on the Australian higher education institutions. For instance, some universities have paused hiring, there's a hiring freeze, and the University of Australia and some other bodies estimate around, over 21,000 jobs may be cut within the 6 months. And of course, the postponement of large scale projects. But also I think there's some positive, for instance, with regards to this change, and for instance, in the human resource area, a lot of universities have implemented kind of job market or skills market where, maybe, staff, do not have a lot of activities in their regular portfolio, offer their skills in communication, in marketing, finance to other divisions, which are, understaffed at this stage. So I think there's a lot of internal solidarity, which is happening among the higher education sector. And I think, look at the positive sense, I'm really very overwhelmed. And I think many of other universities in this panel are overwhelmed by the global community and solidarity we have received. On a weekly basis, we receive many letters from our partner universities, and we also sent many letters of support to our partner university, particularly in China. And it's also research collaboration. We see immediately there's a very fast spread of research collaboration, whether existing or new partnership being forged to combat COVID-19. And one very interesting anecdote I want to share with you, we wanted to send some medical or PPE, personal protection equipment to our partners in Wuhan, but due to the restrictions in travel and the shipping, we couldn't send it. But immediately, our partner universities in Hubei province offered to send us, some PPE equipment. So that's really, I think, a real showcase of, global academic solidarity, particularly among the universities. And what we have also been doing, and I'm very proud with our Deakin Abroad team, which look after our mobility, we have to repatriate very rapidly a number of our students abroad, nearly 100 of them, which are stuck in some, even remote areas. I remember talking to both Australian governments as well as the Peruvian governments to evacuate one of our students from a remote part of Peru to the capital, then go on for a consular flight back to Australia. And it was not easy because there was internal lockdown in Peru and you need official papers from both Peru and Australia. So I think that the goodwill we have from the governments around the world is really important. And I think thirdly, I think the positive side is flexible policies from both hosting and sending governments for international students. For instance, the Chinese Service Center for Scholarly Exchange, CSCSE, which is the main body for recognition of international qualifications gained abroad, have relaxed their regulation to allow online education to be counted as the qualification Chinese students study abroad. So when they study online in China, their educations will also be recognized by the foreign university. So I think that's a really good sign to show this flexibility, but also the flexibility are shown in Australia among the Australian Department of Home Affairs for visas, but also for the accreditation agency in Texas to allow flexible delivery and to allow flexibility in visa schemes for accommodating those students stuck abroad or students have to study online. And also we are very proud in doing some new ways and under this COVID-19 scenario to ensure students do have global exposure and global learning experience. For instance, we are discussing a number of partner universities to have virtual mobility and to have virtual exchange and online summer or winter schools. And what is also interesting, we are talking with some partners, industry partners to have a virtual internship, for instance, with Australian Chamber of Commerce in China to provide students with online business consulting projects for them to get occupied and to have this learning experience. And we also are talking with partners to establish, looking at potential online alliance, online networks. So I will be very happy to have the chance to discuss with each of you individually to see how we can work together. And also one very important dimension, we also hope to have some innovation for the Australia flagship program called New Colombo program. Some of you may have heard an Australian government initiative launched in 2014 to allow Australia students to travel to Indo-Pacific regions and to allow them to have international exposure, particularly to the neighboring countries. And we hope, we are lobbying the Australian government to have relaxed that, to replace potentially physical mobility to virtual mobility to our neighboring countries. And also, I think, this is an important period for Chinese universities, and some of the colleagues have already mentioned that. And due to the hiring freeze, I think that's a potential opportunity for, it will be more Chinese scholars and the researcher abroad may want to return to China. So that's potential to collaborate even more and to, to have this high grade, these returnees for Chinese universities, but also for research collaboration in health and related areas with partners from around the world. And moreover, upgrading of the online delivery, particularly China has already some of the leading very large scale online education platforms, like Tsinghua University has the 学堂在线, the 学堂 X, Shanghai Jiao Tong University has also a MOOC platform, and iCourse, which is also a platform by the Chinese Ministry of Education. So I think they have, a great potential to collaborate more with international platforms and global universities under this scenario. And I want to say that the last part of my talk and my input for this panel discussion is really looking at what it means for a major destination countries for Australia, but also I guess that same applies to US, UK, and Canada, is the reputation of a key and reliable education provider. I think many colleagues previously talked about the importance of showing the openness and also the importance of showing the diversity and the care and responsible for our international students. And I think the 3 dimensions are really important. Is first of the travel bans and the support for international students and some visa schemes. I think the travel ban was a very interesting scenario for Australian universities a few months ago, because Australia was one of the first countries to launch this travel ban for Chinese students, and that was raised a lot of concerns for both institutions here, but also abroad. And this is in a way being successful for the containment of the virus spread in Australia, but also it has resulted in a difficult situation for many Australian universities. And some universities offer travel grants for students to transfer via a 3rd country, and resulted in some discussion and also some difficult cases where students are stuck in a 3rd country, and how do you deal with that? And all students returning to coming to Australia then found they have contracted virus. And for Deakin University, we decided to offer individual support for students, and we contact all of our Chinese students to see what's their intention, whether they want to stay or whether they want to come back to Australia. And we also allowed students to try the online delivery first before they make their mind whether they want to subscribe to the course or not, so to minimize their financial burden on the online delivery. And over the last few weeks, the statistics have shown that over 31,000 Chinese students have arrived in Australia since the travel ban, and almost 1,000 students a day since the travel ban. So it is a large-scale migration, and it is also a difficult one, a sensitive one that has a major impact on the reputation of Australia's education provider, but also for Australian universities. And the second thing I want to talk about is the support for international students. Just over the last Sunday, the Easter Sunday, the federal government announced a major coronavirus relief package for universities, and which is obviously very urgently needed and very much appreciated by the sector. And so there's around $18 billion of funding to universities this year to help if domestic enrollments drop, and to provide around 100 million of regulatory fee relief to tertiary education sector, including the VET sector, the vocational training. However, this is also quite clear that this is a very domestic focus. It's focused mainly on domestic recruitment and domestic students. And for us and for many Australian universities, we value very much the international education, and international students bring not only diversity, they also offer great cultural values, as well as the links between Australia and their home countries in terms of economic projects. So Deakin University has announced 25 million, up to 25 million Australian dollars for international students to support them and to provide them a wide range of support. Students can apply for this support through our student service and to state their case, and each case will be individually evaluated. The Department of Education estimates there are about 568,000 students on a student visa in Australia. Not all of them, of course, rely on part-time job now are disappearing, but we do care the students who are impacted by this, who now are struggling financially, not to mention the academic struggle. So we want to show that we care about the students, and this support is additional support to our funds and hardship support to our regular students. So we really want to say that this is important. International students for the last 20 years have contributed hugely to the social, economic, and cultural well-being for our cities, for our country. and we want to support them during this difficult time. And lastly, I guess this is Henry's favorite topic is the visa scheme. We are also, watching very carefully what other countries are doing, particularly for student visa and post-study work rights. In Canada, in UK, in Australia, and some other countries. How we can provide students with the whole experience, not only study but also the opportunity to gain, professional experiences. Yeah. So these are some of the things happening in the Australian landscape, and also Deakin University. We are very happy to join this dialogue, and I really hope we can continue some of the dialogues even after this panel discussion. Thank you very much, Henry.
Hello, I think our President Wang Huiyao is trying to come back to us again, and I think he can hear us. So meanwhile, I want to try to invite Mr. Miles from the University of Nottingham, Ningbo, China again, but I know that he seems to have been in trouble sending his image, the footage. Mr. Miles, can you hear me? Okay, maybe we give it a bit more time to fix the tech problems. So next, I want to give the floor to Mr. Perrin from Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University, and thank you for your patience. And here, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, and of course, I'd like to say thank you to CCG for inviting me to the discussion. But also, as we get towards our 2 hours, I'd like to say thank you to the audience who have been very, very patient as they listen to some very, very interesting talks and discussions. I'm aware that we're getting towards the end of our time, so I'm going to try and be brief, also so that my colleague from University of Nottingham Ningbo, and also sometimes rival university, can have a say as well. I work at Shanjiao Liverpool University, which is the largest joint venture university in China, not as old as Nottingham Ningbo. We have about 13,000 students on campus. And like all of us, we've been experiencing a time of change at the moment. But what I want to do is focus on the positives. I want to talk about possibilities and the opportunities that the virus, sad as it has been, have actually presented. So how can we transform this crisis into opportunity? How can we embrace opportunity for change, for the way that international education is experienced and how it's operating and how it will operate? Like all institutions, we've converted to online learning, and we've been teaching our students online since the end of February this year. Not quite as long as Tsinghua, but like many Chinese institutions, we took over online learning very, very quickly. And online learning has been a very, very interesting experience and a very, very interesting experiment. Some universities are better prepared than others. Student experience has been varied, but I think there are some positive points that have come out of it. Perhaps firstly, the transformation has been very, very quick, much quicker than people have expected. We've had to do it. And I would say it's been largely successful, so it can be done. Online learning can and is something which is now with us. And like most things that come, they never go away. They may transform, they may change, but it's not going to go away. Perhaps something else which has been clear is that both students and staff need some training. They need some thinking about what does online learning actually really mean, both in terms of how we deliver, what we deliver, and why we're delivering what we're doing. So there needs to be some clear training that needs to take place once this period is over and settled down, as we rethink and reevaluate what's happening to our education. And perhaps also more importantly, as many speakers have mentioned, the platforms already exist. They've already been there. We could have launched into online learning a long time ago. They've been underutilized. And it's really, really sad that perhaps that it's taken something such as COVID-19 for us to realize what potential we actually have had amongst us already. International education, I think, faces fundamental change, but as many people have said, it's not going to go away. It's not going to disappear. We're tied in together too much with us all. Many of the people speaking here today are in partnerships with other institutions who are already here as well. So it's not going to go away, but it is going to transform. How's it going to transform? I just want to sort of mention 2 or 3 things as we run towards the end of the session. Perhaps one thing that's going to change is the type of degree that people study for. Industry tailored education, for example, education which maybe will focus on how we can get our economies moving again and our countries moving again. Clearly, education, international education, is going to have to think and rethink, how does virtual education fit into the framework? What will be the role of artificial intelligence? And also, I'm lucky enough to work at a joint venture university. We have 3 others represented today. What are the opportunities for joint venture universities in these current times? I think in some respects, joint venture universities are a safe haven for international education. They provide almost, not quite, but almost what you would get if you travel to another country, but still within the safety of the known. And at the moment, people want to have the known, the comfort, as well as the international experience. So joint venture universities provide a safe haven in many respects. At XJTLU, one way that we recognize this is through the vast increase in the number of people applying for our master's degrees. And it's almost doubled in terms of applications for master's degrees. The students can still come and get a UK education, but recognizing that they'll still be based within China. I think there's a fear things may come back again and people don't want to be stuck in other countries if necessary in next winter as they have been this year. There's an opportunity for us to rethink partnerships. Many institutions have long lists of partnerships, but do they actually mean anything? Are they real? Perhaps we can now look at virtual partnerships and actually see how we've been working together. The virus has brought people together in a way that is possibly unprecedented, and this gives us real opportunity to rethink our partnerships and rebuild our international partnerships, both at institution and at individual levels. Also gives us an opportunity to think about lifelong learning as an international experience through exploiting our online presence, our virtual presence, as we reach out to our friends and our partners globally as well. And perhaps, maybe not a discussion that everybody wants to have, it brings closer the debate and the discussion about the role of the university in the age of Industry 4.0. Perhaps the hybrid model, the model that XJTLU with its Entrepreneur College is particularly trying to promote, will become much stronger as a result of COVID-19. I think there'll be, as I've mentioned, a discussion about what is actually going to be studied. Will people start to focus much more on the type of degree that they think is going to be important as we try to build our economies, as we try to look at the different types of infrastructure that's going to be needed as we go forward? We believe at XJTLU that there will be a focus on entrepreneur education, flexible skills, a global mindset, and that will lead how the world deals with the current crisis. Even more so, I think degrees need to be relevant, they need to be up to date, because the people who are studying now are the people who are going to be taking the countries and economies forward from where we are at the minute. As I look at the panel, I realize we're all of a certain age, and we should be working with our audience, who I'm guessing is going to be a much younger age, because they're the people who are going to be taking us forward to ensure that we're better prepared for this type of pandemic in the future as well. I think also we need to think about how innovation and transformation is going to play a role, and we need to think about how we're going to bring everything together, both at a local, a national and an international level. And we need to find our partners that we need to want to work with, both internally and externally, as we develop programs which are future ready, but maybe we can say pandemic ready as well in the future. I'm just going to say one last point, and I think one of the most common sayings I hear is that the coronavirus knows no borders. Well, I think international education knows no borders either. So we shouldn't let the coronavirus, we shouldn't let COVID-19 be the barrier to growth, development, and continued progress of international education in these current times. So that's really all that I want to say at this moment, and hopefully we can get to hear what Nick wants to say.
Nick, please. Now we have Nick Mouse.
Nick seems he can see and hear everyone here, but he has I think he has some troubles sending his voice and image in.
Okay. Okay. Maybe what I want to is, because given the time we're already quite limited, we actually had some questions. I want to share some of those questions, and then we will have people, our panelists, distinguished panelists, to answer that. We have one question from Science and Terms Daily here in China. He was asking, what is the biggest impact of epidemic on education? This involves, is it the funding will be getting problem, or adjustment of the teaching methods? Should we need more international cooperation, or what else? And also we have another reporter from China Youth Daily. To what extent will COVID-19 change the identity coordination of Chinese overseas students or exchange students? So would that have an impact on the future Chinese student? And what advice would you give to them to integrate into the destination country in the future? I know that Jeff Lehman probably is running out of this. He has another engagement. Maybe Jeff, if he's still online, you would like to answer that?
Sure, and I do appreciate.
Also, comments of we have a final comments of each other as well. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes each. I hope.
Okay, well, just if I can do both quickly. In terms of integrating into the societies where one studies overseas, I think it's been many decades since I, as a student, studied overseas, and I think it's always tricky at first, and it's tempting to try to spend time with, because it's clever when you're speaking in a second language. But I think what is important to keep in mind is that when you engage with people in their country on their terms, you're really offering them a great favor. You're helping them to see the world through your eyes as well as through their own. And although it can be a bit intimidating, it really is a kindness that you're offering. So I just encourage you just to keep at it while you're doing it. I guess in terms of the overall comments, I just want to thank you, Henry, again for pulling us together. I think most of us have had the chance in our careers to participate in conversations about the research university and how strangely resilient it has been as an institution across the centuries. I think tonight's discussion exemplifies one of the reasons why the research university is so resilient. It's the spirit of my fellow commentators. I think what unites my colleagues here is a sense of optimism, a sense of hope, an appreciation for the silver lining in a difficult time. I think that optimism is what causes researchers to keep looking for solutions, even when it's hard. And I just want to say I share that sense that this is a challenging time for the world, but it's one that research universities and international universities are going to contribute to bringing us forward out of. And so I just want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to be a part of tonight's conversation. Thank you, Henry. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to go. My apologies.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you for your contribution. It's really fascinating. We're having all the leading international corporate universities in China, and also we have other universities. I still want to try Professor Nicholas Myers again. Are you able to talk now? I apologize for some technical problem we have tonight. Oh, okay, so I guess we still wait to see if he finally works. Perhaps I'd like to also hear after Jeffrey, Danny Simon. I know that Do Kun-san has been, really started in the last few years, has been doing very well, and you've been recruiting undergrad students in China and also from around the world. And you had a very good, unique model. And So perhaps you can give your final comments and also regarding questions if you have.
Sure. I mean, I think that there is another saying, small is beautiful. And I think that one of the things and the virtues of DKU is that as a small institution, it is very versatile, it's very agile, and it's very flexible. And we didn't have to move a big battleship. We just have to move a small cruiser or something, you know, in order to make some of these transitions. And I can imagine that the major research universities, as Jeff was suggesting, the challenges must be really substantial. My only suggestion at this point is that I think that with every crisis becomes an opportunity to think out of the box. And I would encourage us not to look at a linear extrapolation from today, what we have, and see if we're going to go back to that way. I think we want to look for important discontinuities that will define the future. And I think the coronavirus event has made us, put us at a position where we can now do some of that rethinking. And I would urge us not to too quickly try to reverse the momentum that's been generated by this because of the unknown that lies ahead. Instead, I would say this is an opportunity to really embrace the chance for change. And as I suggested in my remarks, I don't think it's an either or proposition where we have all online or all face-to-face, or somehow that online is a weakened version of face-to-face. I think what we heard tonight is that the advances in the technology really give a lot of value added to the totality of the student experience when we can harness the technology to enrich and advance the student experience and make it even better than what it's been. And so I would just urge us to keep looking forward and to build for the future. I think, and that's really the lesson that we get from this.
Thank you, Dennis. And I know you've been, doing quite well, and then Kun San is doing very well. We hope that you'll be a bridge between, China and international student exchange. I think also one of the impact probably we have is that with given the COVID-19, a lot of parents are maybe worried about sending students to the U.S. Now, they want to send to Nyu Shanghai and also to Kunsan and all the foreign university here in China. So that may be another new development as well. I would like to have Dean Xielan, Dr. Xielan. You were the dean of Tsinghua University Public Management School, and now you've been taking over as Schwarzman. It's also a new model of international school, and you've been doing very well. And so maybe you can give your final thoughts on tonight's question and your comments as well.
Yeah, first of all, let me join my colleagues to thank you again for organizing this wonderful webinar. I think that it really sheds light on many new issues. I think it's really a very good learning experience. I think that I think that my colleagues know that actually the Schwarzman College, the mission of the Schwarzman College is to build a bridge between China and the world. And the whole model of Schwarzman College is built on international. So our students are international, our faculties are international, and basically actually even our administration are international. We have a lot of colleagues in New York and colleagues in Tsinghua. So I think in a way, this so the coronavirus is really demonstrated that actually how a college like us can actually work together and in such a sort of a beautiful way to really to face up with this challenge and to come out really with a great experience. In a way, we call this a lesson, a globalization class for our scholars of this year, and so I think that we're hoping that throughout this after this process, we can actually learn a lot of new things to enrich our traditional model of sort of on campus, the beautiful college. But now I think we have a lot of new things that we can ponder on and hopefully to come out with an enhanced education and learning model. And, so I think that will, be the benefits to all the, stakeholders of the Schwarzman College. Thank you. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Dr. Wang? Okay, maybe I will take it over and ask Mrs. Blumenthal to give us our final comments on what has been discussed today.
Thank you very much. It's so inspiring to hear how many universities and how many of our speakers have really seen this as a way to, this crisis as a way to think new and act new. And I just want to echo that, because let us be frank and say that international education has always been primarily an elite opportunity and privilege. And the opportunity to come to the United States for international students has very largely benefited people who have the resources to do it, although many graduate students also come with support from the host university as well. Opportunity, and we have recently worked very hard to make it more accessible to students across the institutions by making shorter programs, more flexible programs, blended programs, and I think that's what we need to do going forward as well. As several speakers have said, the reaction against globalism, the anti-globalism movement can threaten internationalism as well. International and globalization are not the same, but unless we really push forward the opportunities for students at every economic level and in every country and in every institution to really benefit from all the resources of the institution, international education will not have succeeded in its mission.
So looks like Mr. Wang is having troubles to be connected with us again. So maybe next let's hear more from Mr. Zhang.
You mean me? Okay.
Yes.
I think personally, I really feel that the world has experienced the kind of a pandemic before, and also that this kind of drastic events multiple times before. I think that after every one of those events, in fact, the world is moving forward and become better and more integrated. And I think that there is no question in my mind that, in fact, that difficult time that we're experiencing today will pass. In fact, that the world will become better. Simply because our institutions are tested, and because of the event, and our people are tested because of the event. And I think that lots of people have done a lot of reflection on what's important in the world and what's important in our life. I think that going forward, I would think that the world definitely will become better. In terms of answering the question about the opportunities for Chinese students in foreign countries, I think ultimately will depend on the economy. I don't think that the campus will be still welcoming and to all the international students, like what Mark Radin and also Jeffrey and everybody also were saying, that the people like us, the educators, will definitely fight for the academic freedom, fighting for the student exchange and so on and so forth. I think that ultimately is really the kind of experience they will go through when they actually get to the countries like US or Australia and those countries. And because it's not just in classroom learning, that's what matters. It's also that the practical training, the job opportunities, and all that, the whole package. That's what matters. So all those things will really depend on how the economy would come back. And I think that that's definitely one of the big indicator that we all need to watch. And in terms of how the COVID-19 affects the funding environment, I think that in my memory, I have never seen anything like what's going on today. Because you look at the Harvard basically saying that they're going to freeze the hiring, right? And internally, there are a lot of freezing on the new spendings, and University of Pennsylvania, for instance, have never done this before. And now that we were told that we freeze the hiring. Not only that, salary increase is going to be frozen unless it's a new promotion. And that has never happened before, even during the global financial crisis and so on and so forth, as far as I can remember. So I think that funding environment is definitely getting worse, and hopefully that it's not going to for too long. And but definitely that universities are getting ready for the long term.
Okay. Thank you, John. And yeah, I think that if Wharton or UPenn felt the shortage, may that also impact us a bit in the future. But I agree with you. You know, we're the academic freedom and the safeguard the international movement of the student, and then that trend will still continue, and that is really one of the globalization trend. I would like to have also David Fletcher. You know, Fletcher, you are the president-elect of Association of International Education Administrators in the U.S. I would like to have your words as well, your final comment.
Well, first of all, Henry, thank you so much for putting this together. I think this is a real value to educators around the world, and apparently there have been 1 million people online looking. So I think this will move the conversation forward. In a sort of final, very brief summation, I'd like to take us back to another period of huge change, at least in U.S. higher education. And I quote my friend, who's actually a former president of the Association of International Education Administrators as well, Gil Merks from Duke, who wrote a paper about the Yale report from I think it was 26. And the Yale report basically said that we should continue with the education that was prevalent at the time. And that was teaching Latin and Greek, and it was the history of the Roman Empire. And that was the basic education. A number of other universities looked at that and said, you know, we need to teach German and French, and we need to teach the history of Western Europe. And that's what students really need to know. By 1860, 750 colleges in the US had gone out of business. And they went out of business because they continued to teach the Latin and the Greek, and they didn't move forward teaching the new curriculum. In my mind, we are at sort of an inflection point again in terms of how we're going to look forward. And I think that depending on how each of us as educators, how each of us as universities respond to this, you will see a very different sort of education moving forward. I agree with my colleagues. We're going to continue to bring students together. We're going to continue to have classroom learning. We need to have the kind of interaction that we've all talked about. But I think we're going to be doing this in a very different way. My hope and belief is that it will be more international in many ways than we've been up until now. And when Peggy talks about this being an elite approach, internationalism has been, My hope is that it's going to be more democratic, because we're going to be able to do more online and reach out in bigger and better ways. And so I'm very optimistic what is on the other side of this pandemic, but it's going to mean that a lot of institutions are going to go through pain between now and getting there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. And you're right. I think that international education will definitely continue, and that is really one of the advanced development of the mankind, that we have more catalysts, we have more students, and so this pandemic has just suddenly let us realize that we have so many international students, and China being the largest student sending country. We certainly really appreciate all of your comments as well. I think this is the first time that we have this Sino-US and Sino-UK and other country president forum online. This is probably one of the first in the world as well, and we're being watched over by almost 1 million viewers. I'd like to try again Nick Miles. I don't know if he still can be assessed. If not, we have a Stuart Perrin have a very brief comment as well. Stuart Perrin.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and be very brief. I think, sadly, out of many crises come opportunity. It's sad that we have to have a crisis to have the opportunities that we've currently got. I think if we read the newspapers on a daily basis, it's very, very depressing. So really, international education and education generally has a really, really important role to play. I think Peggy made probably one of the most important points that I've heard this evening, in that if international education doesn't, or it isn't successful in changing the outlook, the nationalistic outlooks that we see from people coming through our presses and other media forms at the moment, if it doesn't succeed, then maybe international education hasn't worked as well as it could do. But I'm heartened by the fact, and from what I've heard today, and from the people that I'm seeing, the fact we've got over 1 million people listening in today, I'm heartened by the fact that I think that international education is going to go forward. It's going to be really important, and it's going to be one of the most important things in terms of making sure that we overcome the virus, and that we go forward in terms of positive, new, exciting, and different types of educational models and educational deliveries. I'm really excited about what we've got coming forward. I think we've got lots of opportunities. I'm just very sad about how we've got to this point.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. And now we have Sam. You have a maybe very brief final comments. Sam Wei.
Thank you, Henry, once again for this wonderful and timely discussion opportunity. And I really feel very encouraged after listening to all my panel speakers from around the world. And particularly, I think, this important mission of international education, in combating, xenophobia, in promoting global citizenship is really important. And I think, Chinese university do have a great role to play, particularly, China will be the first, or if one of the first countries to come out of, the coronavirus crisis. And already in Australia, we're talking about, potential lifting of travel bans. China and New Zealand will be the first 2 candidates. So I think that has a lot of advantage in, promoting, international education, and also giving more kind of capacity for international collaboration. I would also think, particularly with developing world, in terms of the research and the teaching we do in health and health related areas to Africa, maybe trilateral partnership with Europe, with North America, with Australia, with Africa. I think that's really important, and they do need a lot of capacity building. And also I think joint funding initiatives between China and Europe, with US and Australia also is really important at this difficult period. And I really also want to congratulate, we talk about resilience of universities, but I also want to congratulate resilience of Chinese students. They have been very resilient, and international students as a whole has been very resilient during the difficult periods. I think As I said, they are very important social fabrics of our universities, of our societies, and we can't just take a simplistic view, viewing them, particularly, I guess, in the Anglo country as them as a cash cows. We need to really spend the good and bad times together with international students, and really making them a part of our society and make them feel welcome and appreciated. So yes, just for finish by saying that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sen. I think we really run a lot of time, and apologize that we had a problem with Nick Miles, that he couldn't join us speaking with us. We also experienced some technical problem because I think it's Friday and then office is closed and we have some technical problem here. I apologize for that. But I think overall, I think we had a very good, excellent discussion. I really appreciate all the president, experts and colleagues from different parts of the world join us. And I think this is really, it's the worst of time, but also probably is one of the challenging, but also opportunities as well. And also crisis may, give birth to the opportunities. And so we actually, the international education is the absolutely crucial part of the bridge building and the humanity, spirit, and also the common understanding, and then really can get us out of this ideological and cultural differences. I think that really we are seeking the exchanges, and that's really important. So I think China now being the largest student sending country in the world, and we hope to get more international students come to China as well. We have only 13,000 students from US, where we have over 400,000 students in Chinese students in the US. But the student from US to China is very small. But hopefully we'll have more. And I think that this kind of dialogue is very important. We have a lot of experiment. We have Sino-Foreign University. We have a Strathman College and other different programs. But also we hope that Chinese universities will also be more international, and we have so many things to learn. But I think right now we are actually the pandemic actually brought us all together. Even in some part of the political affair, there's quite a bit of difference. But I think academics, scholars, think tanks, universities should really get together, and then we share a lot of common heritage and spirit. So international education, after we're discussing tonight, is really important, and that can promote understanding, that can reduce mistrust, that can really help build a better world. So I think given the time we have tonight, I really appreciate all of you taking such a great time to participate this first international webinar on international education with all the universities, presidents from China, US, UK, Australia, and others. So I really, on behalf of CCG, I want to thank you all. I also want to thank our viewers in China and internationally, for almost 1 million viewers online, and a lot of students, I believe. And I hope that we can continue the dialogue, and I hope we can build a better world through international education. Thank you all very much. So we're finished tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.